The massive trading station called Kepler's Rest floated quietly in space, far from any planet or government control. Ships from dozens of different alien species came here to buy, sell, and make deals without worrying about wars or politics. Inside the station's main trading hall, hundreds of beings moved around, some walking on 2 legs, others crawling on 6, and a few floating through the air. Thekvar stood near a large holographic display showing mining rights for asteroid fields. His reptilian skin gleamed under the station's bright lights, and his ceremonial sword hung at his side. As a senior warrior of the Zephyrian Empire, he rarely handled business deals, but this mining contract was too important to trust to anyone else. The Zephyrians needed rare metals for their new fleet of warships. "The terms are acceptable," Thekvar said in his deep, growling voice to the alien trader across from him. "We agree to pay 70,000 credits for exclusive mining rights to sectors 12 through 18. The trader, a blue-skinned creature with 4 arms, nodded eagerly. "Excellent, we just need to finalize the shipping arrangements and—" "Excuse me, Warrior Thekvar." A human voice interrupted their conversation. Thekvar turned toward the sound, expecting to see some minor official or messenger. Instead, his entire body went rigid with shock. His yellow eyes widened, and his clawed hands began to shake. Standing just a few feet away was a human male, about 30 years old, with short black hair and confident dark eyes. He wore a simple merchant's uniform, but Thekvar barely noticed. The clothes. What he saw was impossible, a ghost from his past. "Captain Lee Min-ho," Thekvar whispered, his voice barely audible. The human smiled politely. "Actually, I'm just a civilian merchant now. I heard you might be interested in purchasing some rare earth elements from the Outer Rim territories. I represent several mining operations that—" "No." Thekvar's voice cut through the air like his sword. "This cannot be." The blue-skinned trader looked confused. Other beings in the area began to notice the tension and started moving away from the 2 figures. Minho's friendly expression changed to concern. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake," Minho said carefully. "Have we met before?" Thekvar took a step closer, his massive frame towering over the human. "Battle of Crimson Nebula. 93 years ago. You commanded the human destroyer ship called Iron Will. You fought bravely. But I cut you down with this very blade." He touched the handle of his ceremonial sword. "I watched the life leave your eyes. I heard your final breath." Minho's face went pale, but he shook his head firmly. "That's impossible. I've never been in any battle. I'm just a merchant. I trade in minerals and rare metals. You must have me confused with someone else." "Zephyrians do not forget," Thekvar growled, his voice getting louder. "Our memories are perfect. Every detail, every moment is preserved, forever in our minds. I remember the smell of smoke from your burning ship. I remember how you refused to surrender even when your crew was dead. I remember driving my sword through your heart." The trading hall was getting quieter as more beings stopped their business to watch the confrontation. Station security guards began moving closer, but they kept their distance from the angry Zephyrian warrior. Minho raised his hands peacefully. "Look, I understand you're upset, but I promise you've never seen me before today. Maybe this other person just looked like me. Humans can sometimes appear similar to each other." "No," Thekvar said, his voice now a dangerous whisper. "You are exactly the same. Not similar. Identical. Same face, same voice, same way of standing. But that was 93 years ago. You should be dead. If somehow you survived, you should be old, wrinkled, gray-haired. Instead, you look exactly as you did the day I killed you." Minho's confusion looked completely real. His eyes showed no sign of lying or pretending. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, making sure the angry Zephyrian could see every movement. "Here, look at my identification cards. Maybe this will clear things up." He pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic display appeared showing official documents from the Galactic Trade Commission. The name read, "Lee Min-ho, civilian merchant, born 2387 on New Sol Colony." The photo matched his face perfectly. Thekvar stared at the documents, his reptilian features twisting with frustration. "Documents can be forged," he said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "These aren't just any documents," Minho replied, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. "They're linked to the Central Galactic Database. Every transaction I've made, every place I've traveled, every contract I've signed. It's all recorded here for the past 8 years." By now a small crowd had gathered around them. Several station security guards approached cautiously. The head of security, a tall, insect-like being with multiple eyes, stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" the security chief asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to breaking up fights. "This human is lying about his identity," Thekvar declared, pointing one clawed finger at Min-Ho. "He claims to be a simple merchant, but I know him to be a military captain I killed nearly a century ago." The security chief's multiple eyes focused on both of them. "That's quite an accusation. Sir," he said, turning to Min-Ho, "do you have any military background?" Min-Ho shook his head firmly. "None at all. I've been a civilian trader my entire adult life. I've never even held a weapon, let alone commanded a warship." "Then explain this," Thekvar said, his voice becoming more intense. "What is the standard crew complement for a human destroyer-class vessel?" Min-Ho opened his mouth to say he didn't know, but then paused. His expression changed slightly, as if he was remembering something from deep in his mind. 147 crew members, 12 officers, 25 technical specialists, and 110 enlisted personnel." The crowd murmured in surprise. Even the security chief seemed taken aback. "That's exactly right," Thekvar said, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Now tell me, merchant, what is the maximum effective range of a human plasma torpedo?" Again, Min-Ho hesitated, looking confused by his own knowledge. 15,000 kilometers in vacuum, but accuracy drops significantly beyond 8,000 due to energy dispersal, he said automatically, then immediately looked shocked. "Wait, how do I know that? I don't understand military weapons." "Because you commanded a ship that used them," Thekvar roared. "Because you fired those very weapons at my fleet." Min-Ho stumbled backward, his face pale. "I don't understand what's happening. I shouldn't know those things. I'm just a trader. I sell minerals and rare earth elements. I've never been in a battle in my life." "What about shield harmonics?" Thekvar pressed. "How do you adjust deflector shields to counter Zephyrian energy weapons? You rotate the shield frequency every 3 seconds and boost power to the upper bands," Min-Ho answered immediately, then covered his mouth with his hand in horror. "No, that's impossible. I don't know anything about shields or weapons or—" The security chief stepped between them. "This is getting very strange." "Sir," he said to Min-Ho, "you claim to have no military experience, yet you're answering these technical questions perfectly." Min-Ho's hands were shaking now. "I don't know what's wrong with me. These answers are just appearing in my head, like memories that aren't mine." "They are yours," Thekvar said, his voice now more thoughtful than angry. "But how is this possible? You died. I saw you die. I felt my blade pierce your heart. Yet here you stand, with all the knowledge of that dead captain, but claiming to be someone else entirely." The warrior began pacing back and forth, his mind racing. "Humans," he muttered. "What secrets do your people hide? What dark technology allows you to cheat death itself?" After the confrontation at Kepler's Rest, Thekvar couldn't sleep. The impossible sight of Min-Ho alive and unchanged haunted his thoughts. For 3 days he paced his quarters on his ship, replaying every detail of that ancient battle in his perfect Zephyrian memory. He could still smell the burning metal, still hear the screams of dying soldiers, still feel the resistance as his blade cut through the human captain's chest. But Min-Ho was alive, walking, talking, breathing, and completely unaware of his own death. Thekvar activated his personal computer and began searching through military databases. As a senior warrior, he had access to historical battle records from across the galaxy. He started with the Battle of Crimson Nebula, pulling up official reports from 93 years ago. There it was, in black and white text: Captain Lee Min-Ho, commanding officer of the destroyer Iron Will, killed in action during the final assault. Body recovered and confirmed dead by medical officers from 3 different species, including Zephyrian combat medics. The report included detailed medical scans of the corpse, DNA analysis, fingerprints, dental records. Everything matched the man Thekvar had met on the trading station. The documents even contained witness statements from surviving crew members who had seen their captain die. How is this possible? Thekvar whispered to himself, staring at the screen. He decided to dig deeper. Using his military connections, he accessed the central personnel database and ran a search for the current Lee Min-ho. What he found made his blood run cold. The man's DNA was identical, not similar but exactly the same down to every molecule. Fingerprints matched perfectly. Even his voice patterns and facial structure were identical to measurements taken from the dead captain decades ago. Yet according to all official records, this Min-ho had been born 37 years ago on New Seoul Colony and had lived his entire life as a civilian trader. Thekvar leaned back in his chair, his reptilian mind working through the possibilities. Cloning technology existed, but it was primitive and heavily regulated. Nobody had ever created a clone with the original person's memories intact, and even if they had, why would anyone clone a dead military officer just to make him a merchant? Something was very wrong. Over the next week, Thekvar began researching other human military casualties from recent decades. He started with major battles, where he or other Zephyrian forces had been present, focusing on confirmed human deaths that had been witnessed by multiple species. What he discovered shook him to his core. Commander Park Ji-woo had died in the Vega incident 15 years ago. Thekvar had read the battle reports. The man had been sucked into space when his ship's hull was breached. His body was never recovered, but multiple witnesses saw him die in the vacuum. Yet 3 months ago, a merchant named Park Ji-woo had registered a new trading vessel in the Outer Rim territories. Same face, same DNA, same age as when he died. Lieutenant Kim So-ra had been killed defending a colony ship from pirates 12 years ago. Video recordings showed her being shot multiple times by energy weapons. Her funeral had been broadcast across human space. But 6 months ago, someone matching her exact description had applied for a mining permit on Titan Station. The pattern continued. Captain Choi Dong-min officially killed when his ship was destroyed by a black hole's gravity well. Dr. Lee Hai-jin, who died in a laboratory explosion on Ma after the confrontation at Kepler's Rest, Thekvar couldn't sleep. The impossible sight of Min-ho alive and unchanged haunted his thoughts. For 3 days he paced his quarters on his ship, replaying every detail of that ancient battle in his perfect Zephyrian memory. He could still smell the burning metal, still hear the screams of dying soldiers, still feel the resistance as his blade cut through the human captain's chest. But Min-ho was alive, walking, talking, breathing, and completely unaware of his own death. Thekvar activated his personal computer and began searching through military databases. As a senior warrior, he had access to historical battle records from across the galaxy. He started with the Battle of Crimson Nebula, pulling up official reports from 93 years ago. There it was, in black and white text. Captain Lee, Min-ho commanding officer of the destroyer Iron Will, killed in action during the final assault. Body recovered and confirmed dead by medical officers from 3 different species, including Zephyrian combat medics. The report included detailed medical scans of the corpse. DNA analysis, fingerprints, dental records, everything matched the man Thekvar had met on the trading station. The documents even contained witness statements from surviving crew members who had seen their captain die. How is this possible? Thekvar whispered to himself, staring at the screen. He decided to dig deeper. Using his military connections, he accessed the central personnel database and ran a search for the current Lee Min-ho. What he found made his blood run cold. The man's DNA was identical, not similar, but exactly the same down to every molecule. Fingerprints matched perfectly. Even his voice patterns and facial structure were identical to measurements taken from the dead captain decades ago. Yet according to all official records, this Min-ho had been born 37 years ago on New Seoul Colony and had lived his entire life as a civilian trader. Thekvar leaned back in his chair, his reptilian mind working through the possibilities. Cloning technology existed, but it was primitive and heavily regulated. Nobody had ever created a clone with the original person's memories intact, and even if they had, Why would anyone clone a dead military officer just to make him a merchant? Something was very wrong. Over the next week, Thekvar began researching other human military casualties from recent decades. He started with major battles, where he or other Zephyrian forces had been present, focusing on confirmed human deaths that had been witnessed by multiple species. What he discovered shook him to his core. Commander Park Ji-woo had died in the Vega incident 15 years ago. Thekvar had read the battle reports. The man had been sucked into space when his ship's hull was breached. His body was never recovered, but multiple witnesses saw him die in the vacuum. Yet 3 months ago, a merchant named Park Ji-woo had registered a new trading vessel in the Outer Rim territories. Same face, same DNA, same age as when he died. Lieutenant Kim So-ra had been killed defending a colony ship from pirates 12 years ago. Video recordings showed her being shot multiple times by energy weapons. Her funeral had been broadcast across human space. But 6 months ago, someone matching her exact description had applied for a mining permit on Titan Station. The pattern continued. Captain Choi Dong-min officially killed when his ship was destroyed by a black hole's gravity well. Dr. Lee Hae-jin, who died in a laboratory explosion on Mars. Sergeant Yoon Tae-ho, killed in ground combat against rebel forces. All dead, all officially confirmed, all witnessed by non-human observers, and all apparently alive, working as civilians across the galaxy, looking exactly as they had on the day they died. Thekvar created a secret file on his personal system and began documenting everything. The more he researched, the more disturbed he became. This wasn't just a few isolated cases, it was a pattern spanning nearly a century of human conflicts. "What are you hiding?" he asked aloud, staring at photographs of the supposedly dead humans. "What kind of technology allows you to bring back the dead, and why does nobody remember dying?" The warrior's investigation had only just begun, but already he suspected he had stumbled onto one of humanity's greatest secrets, a secret so important that they were willing to create false identities and fake entire lifetimes to protect it. Eyes. Sergeant Yoon Tae-ho, killed in ground combat against rebel forces. All dead, all officially confirmed, all witnessed by non-human observers, and all apparently alive, working as civilians across the galaxy, looking exactly as they had on the day they died. Thekvar created a secret file on his personal system and began documenting everything. The more he researched, the more disturbed he became. This wasn't just a few isolated cases. It was a pattern spanning nearly a century of human conflicts. "What are you hiding?" he asked aloud, staring at photographs of the supposedly dead humans. "What kind of technology allows you to bring back the dead? And why does nobody remember dying?" The warrior's investigation had only just begun, but already Thekvar didn't realize he was being watched until it was almost too late. He had spent 2 weeks digging through classified databases, following digital trails that led from one impossible resurrection to another. Each case made the mystery deeper and more frightening. The first sign of trouble came when his computer started running slower than usual. Files took longer to open, and some documents seemed to glitch for no reason. At first he thought it was just old hardware, but Thekvar hadn't survived decades of warfare by ignoring small warning signs. Late one night, while reviewing personnel files in his ship's quarters, he noticed something strange. His computer showed that someone else was accessing the same database at the exact same time. Someone was watching what he was looking at, following his every move through the digital records. Thekvar quickly shut down his system and sat in the darkness thinking. Human intelligence services were known throughout the galaxy for their skill at surveillance and information gathering. If they were monitoring his investigation, it meant he was getting close to something they desperately wanted to keep secret. The next morning, he decided to test his suspicions. He used a public computer terminal at Kepler's Rest trading station and searched for information about a completely random human merchant, someone who had never been in the military and had no connection to his investigation. Within hours, that merchant received an unexpected visit from tax inspectors who asked detailed questions about his recent activities. There was no doubt now. The humans were watching him. But Thekvar was a veteran warrior who had spent his life gathering intelligence on enemy forces. He knew how to be careful. He began using different computer terminals across the station, never staying in one place too long, and accessing information in small pieces that would be hard to track. What he discovered over the following days made his earlier findings look simple. Commander Park Ji-woo's case was particularly disturbing. The man had died in the Vega incident when rebel forces attacked a civilian transport convoy. Video recordings from multiple ships showed Park's fighter being hit by 3 missile strikes. The explosion had been so violent that pieces of his ship were scattered across thousands of kilometers of space. There was no way anyone could have survived. Yet the current Park Ji-woo wasn't just alive. He was thriving as a successful trader in the Outer Rim territories. HFY found shipping records showing that this new Park had detailed knowledge of space combat tactics and could pilot ships with the skill of a trained military officer. When questioned by customs officials about his unusual flying abilities, Park always claimed he was just naturally talented. Lieutenant Kim So-ra's story was even stranger. She had died defending a colony ship from pirates, fighting hand-to-hand, combat in the ship's corridors. Security cameras had recorded her final moments as she was overwhelmed by enemy fighters and shot multiple times. Her body had been recovered and buried with full military honors on her homeworld. But 6 months ago, a woman with Kim's exact appearance had started working as a security consultant for merchant vessels. She displayed incredible fighting skills and seemed to know advanced combat techniques that took years to learn. When asked about her training, she always said she had learned everything from books and practice videos. The most impossible case was Captain Choi Dong-min. His ship had been caught in the gravity well of a black hole while attempting to rescue a damaged freighter. Dozens of witnesses from multiple species had watched his vessel being stretched and torn apart as it fell toward the event horizon. The laws of physics made survival absolutely impossible, yet someone matching Choi's description exactly was now running a small shipping company near the border territories. This new Choi had an uncanny ability to navigate dangerous space routes and seemed to understand gravitational effects better than most trained scientists. As HFY compiled his evidence, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Humanity had somehow developed technology that could bring people back from death. Not just death, but complete physical destruction. They were creating perfect copies of their dead heroes, complete with all their skills and knowledge, but without memories of their previous lives. The implications were staggering. If humans could resurrect their best warriors, scientists, and leaders, they would have an enormous advantage over every other species in the galaxy. They could take incredible risks in battle, knowing that death was only temporary for their most valuable people. But why the secrecy? Why create false identities and fake civilian careers? And most importantly, how many dead humans were actually walkie HFY knew he needed answers, and the only way to get them was to question Min-ho directly. But this couldn't happen on Kepler's Rest, where human intelligence agents were watching his every move. He needed somewhere private, somewhere he could use Zephyrian interrogation techniques without interference. The opportunity came when Min-ho's shipping schedule took him to the Outer Rim territories. HFY followed at a distance, waiting for the right moment. When Min-ho's cargo ship docked at a remote asteroid mining station for refueling, the Zephyrian warrior made his move. The mining station was small and poorly monitored. Most of the workers were busy with their own tasks and paid little attention to travelers. HFY approached Min-ho's ship just as the human was finishing his cargo inspection. "We need to talk," HFY said, stepping out from behind a stack of supply containers. Min-ho looked up, startled. "You? What are you doing here? I thought we settled this misunderstanding back at Kepler's Rest." "Nothing was settled," HFY replied calmly. "You have answers I need, and I'm going to get them." Before Min-ho could react, HFY moved with the speed that made Zephyrian warriors feared across the galaxy. In seconds, he had the human restrained and was guiding him toward the abandoned section of the mining station. "This is kidnapping," Min-ho protested, struggling against the warrior's grip. "You can't just grab people and drag them off." "I can and I will," HFY said simply. "Too many impossible things have happened, and you're the key to understanding them." He brought Min-ho to an old storage room deep in the station's lower levels. The room was soundproof and rarely visited. Thekvar had prepared it earlier with Zephyrian truth detection equipment, devices that could monitor brain activity, stress levels, and chemical changes that indicated lying. "Sit," Thekvar commanded, pointing to a chair in the center of the room. Minho had no choice but to comply. Thekvar attached several small sensors to the human's forehead and wrists. The devices would monitor his nervous system and detect any attempt to deceive. "I'm going to ask you questions," Thekvar explained, "and you're going to answer them truthfully. These sensors will tell me if you're lying." "I've already told you everything I know," Minho said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm just a merchant. I don't know anything about military battles or dead captains." Thekvar activated the sensors and watched the readings on his portable display. Minho's stress levels were high, but there were no signs of deception. The human genuinely believed what he was saying. "Tell me about your earliest memory," Thekvar began. Minho closed his eyes, thinking. "I remember being about 4 years old, playing in the gardens on New Sol Colony. My parents were there, and they were teaching me to identify different plants. The sensors showed this was true, no deception detected. What about your education, your training as a merchant?" "I went to standard schools on New Sol until I was 18. Then I attended the Galactic Commerce Academy for 3 years. After that, I worked for a trading company for 5 years before starting my own business." Again, the sensors showed truth, but Thekvar pressed deeper. "Have you ever been in a military situation, ever held a weapon?" "No, never. I've always been a civilian." The sensors flickered. There was something there. Not exactly a lie, but uncertainty. "Think carefully," Thekvar said, his voice becoming more intense. "Have you ever experienced combat? Ever been in a life-or-death situation?" Minho's breathing became faster. No, I don't think so. I mean, I've had some close calls with pirates in dangerous sectors, but nothing serious." "What about pain? Extreme physical pain? Have you ever been seriously injured?" "Just normal accidents. A broken arm when I was 12, some cuts and bruises from working on ships, but the sensors were showing increasing brain activity. Something was stirring in Minho's mind." Thekvar leaned closer. "I want you to think about darkness, complete darkness, being surrounded by nothing but black emptiness." Minho's eyes snapped open. "Why would you ask me that? Just think about it. Darkness. Cold. The feeling of floating in nothing." Suddenly, Minho gasped. His body went rigid and his eyes rolled back. I can't breathe. There's no air. Everything is burning." The sensors were going wild. Minho's brain activity was spiking in ways that suggested buried memories were surfacing. "What do you see?" Thekvar asked urgently. "Fire, explosions, people screaming." Minho's voice was barely a whisper. "My chest. Something's wrong with my chest. It hurts so much." "Keep going. What else?" "Bright lights, white rooms, people in masks standing over me. They're doing something to me. They're fixing me." Minho began to shake. "But I'm supposed to be dead. I remember being dead." The sensors showed that Minho was experiencing genuine recovered memories, not fantasies or lies. "Tell me about the people in masks," Thekvar said softly. "They're saying my name. They're saying I'm important, that I'm needed, that I have to come back." Tears began streaming down Minho's face. "They're putting something in my head. New. Memories, a new life. They're telling me to forget everything that happened before." Minho suddenly screamed and collapsed in the chair, his body convulsing. The buried memories were fighting against whatever had been done to suppress them. Thekvar watched in fascination and horror as the human's mind battled against itself, trying to reconcile 2 different sets of memories, one of a simple merchant's life and another of death and rebirth in mysterious facilities. The sound of boots echoing through the mining station's corridors made Thekvar's head snap up. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving fast and with military precision. His warrior instincts kicked in immediately. They had been found. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Minho, who was still shaking from the recovered memories. The human looked confused and terrified, sweat pouring down his face as his mind struggled with conflicting information. The footsteps stopped right outside their door. Tekvar heard the faint beeping of electronic equipment. They were scanning the room, target confirmed. "Inside," a voice said quietly, "preparing for breach." Tekvar grabbed his weapon and positioned himself behind a stack of storage containers. He had maybe 30 seconds before they came through that door. The room had only one exit, and he was badly outnumbered. The door exploded inward with a flash of light and smoke. 4 figures in black combat suits rushed in, weapons raised and ready. They moved like professional soldiers, spreading out to cover all angles of the room. "Lee Min-ho, we're here to extract you," the lead figure called. "Out." Through the smoke, Tekvar could see it was a human woman, with short hair and cold, calculating eyes. "Agent Han Yu-jin, Human Intelligence Division. Are you injured?" I don't understand what's happening to me," Min-ho said, his voice weak and confused. "My head feels like it's splitting apart. I keep remembering things that can't be real." "That's the conditioning breaking down," Yu-jin said, her voice becoming gentler. "We need to get you out of here before more damage is done." Tekvar stepped out from behind the containers, his weapon aimed at the agents. "Nobody is going anywhere. Until I get answers." The human soldiers immediately turned their weapons toward him. The room filled with tension as both sides faced off. "Stand down, warrior," Yu-jin said calmly. "You're interfering with classified human operations. This doesn't concern your people." "Everything about this concerns me," Tekvar growled. "You're bringing people back from the dead. You're violating the natural order of life and death itself." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Yu-jin replied. "Min-ho, can you move?" But before Min-ho could answer, one of the soldiers made a mistake. He shifted his position slightly, and his weapon's targeting laser swept across Tekvar's eyes. The Zephyrian warrior's combat instincts took over, and he dove to the side. The room erupted in chaos. Energy weapons fired in all directions, lighting up the storage room with deadly beams of light. Tekvar rolled behind another stack of containers as the humans spread out to flank him. But what happened next shocked him more than the firefight itself. Min-ho, who had been sitting helplessly in the chair just moments before, suddenly moved, with incredible speed. As one of the soldiers ran past him, the supposed merchant grabbed the man's weapon with reflexes that were impossibly fast. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the soldier and rolled behind cover. "What the hell?" the soldier gasped, staring at his empty hands. Min-ho looked just as surprised as everyone else. "How did I do that? I don't know how to fight." But his body clearly disagreed. When another soldier tried to circle around him, Min-ho reacted without thinking. He moved like a trained combat veteran, using hand-to-hand fighting techniques that took years to master. He disarmed the second soldier and knocked him unconscious with a precise strike to the neck. "Impossible," Tekvar whispered, watching from his hiding spot. "No civilian merchant moves like that." Yu-jin was shouting orders to her remaining team members, but she was also staring at Min-ho in amazement. The programming is completely breaking down. His original training is coming back. Min-ho stood in the center of the room, holding a weapon he claimed he'd never used before, yet handling it like an expert. His eyes were different now, sharper, more focused. The confused merchant was disappearing, replaced by something else. "I remember now," Min-ho said quietly, his voice changing from scared civilian to calm military officer. "I remember the battle. I remember dying. I remember them bringing me back." Tekvar took advantage of the confusion to make his move, but as he stepped out of cover, Min-ho spun toward him with superhuman speed. For a moment, their eyes met, across the smoky room. "You were right," Min-ho said, his voice filled with a terrible understanding. "You did kill me, and they brought me back." Yu-jin was already activating some kind of device. "Emergency extraction, now!" A blinding flash filled the room. When Tekvar's vision cleared, the humans were gone. All of them had vanished, leaving only scorch marks on the walls and the lingering smell of energy weapons. But on the floor where Min-ho had been standing, someone had scratched a single word into the metal. "Phoenix." Tekvar stared at the word, his mind racing. Phoenix. In ancient human mythology, the phoenix was a legendary bird that died in flames and was reborn from its own ashes, a creature that could never truly die, always returning to life stronger than before. The connection hit him like a physical blow. Humanity had named their resurrection program after a mythical creature that conquered death itself. They weren't just bringing people back. They were creating their own phoenixes, warriors who could die and be reborn over and over again. And if Minho was just one example, how many more were out there? How many dead humans were walking around the galaxy, living new lives without knowing their true nature? The thought terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced in battle. After the rescue operation, Thekvar knew the humans would be watching him more carefully than ever. But the word Phoenix had given him exactly what he needed, a starting point for his investigation. He couldn't use official channels anymore, so he turned to the galaxy's underground information networks. In the shadowy corners of space stations and hidden data markets, Thekvar began searching for any mention of Phoenix Protocol. It took weeks of careful questioning and expensive bribes, but slowly, pieces of information began to surface. A former human military contractor mentioned strange research facilities that appeared overnight and disappeared just as quickly. A salvage operator talked about finding destroyed ships with no bodies inside, even though the crew quarters were intact. A medical equipment supplier spoke of unusual orders for brain scanning devices and memory storage systems. Each piece of information was small and seemingly unconnected, but together they painted a disturbing picture. Humanity was running secret operations involving advanced medical technology, memory manipulation, and something that required the complete disappearance of human bodies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While investigating a lead on a remote research station, Thekvar was approached by a human woman in her 50s. She looked nervous and kept glancing around as if she expected to be followed. "You're the Zephyrian asking questions about Phoenix Protocol," she said quietly. "I heard about you through some mutual contacts." Thekvar studied her carefully. She had the bearing of a scientist, intelligent eyes, careful movements, and the kind of pale skin that came from spending too much time indoors under artificial lights. "Who are you?" he asked. "Dr. Yun-Hai-In. I used to work for Human Military. Research Division. What you're investigating, I helped create it." The confession hung in the air between them. Thekvar felt his heart rate increase. Finally, someone who might have real answers. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Dr. Yoon's hands were shaking slightly. "Because I can't live with what we've done anymore. When we started the project, we thought we were saving lives. We thought we were protecting humanity's best and brightest from permanent death, but it became something else, something terrible." She led him to a small private room in the station's lower levels. Once they were alone, she activated a signal jammer to prevent electronic surveillance. "Phoenix Protocol began 30 years ago," she explained. "The human military was losing too many exceptional officers and soldiers in conflicts across the galaxy. These weren't just ordinary people. They were geniuses, heroes, irreplaceable talents that took decades to develop." Thekvar listened intently as she continued. "The program started with advanced cloning technology. We could create perfect physical copies of any person using their DNA. But that was just the beginning. The real breakthrough came when we developed memory imprinting, the ability to copy someone's entire consciousness and transfer it to a new body." "You're talking about copying souls," Thekvar said, his voice filled with horror. "Not souls, minds, memories, skills, personality patterns, learned behaviors, everything that makes a person who they are. We could take all of that from a dead person's brain and implant it into a clone body." Dr. Yoon pulled out a small data device and showed him holographic images of the process. "When a Phoenix Protocol subject dies, we recover their body as quickly as possible. We extract their brain patterns and transfer them to a waiting clone. The new body is identical to the original, and it has all the same memories and skills." Thekvar stared at the images. Laboratories filled with growing clone bodies, massive computers storing human consciousness, and medical procedures that looked more like science fiction than reality. "But why don't they remember dying?" he asked. "That's the most disturbing part," Dr. Yoon said, her voice becoming quiet. "We discovered that the trauma of death was too much for the copied minds to handle. Many subjects became insane when they remembered their own deaths. So we developed memory suppression technology. She showed him more images, subjects lying unconscious while machines worked on their brains. We erased their memories of death and replaced them with false memories of a different life. A civilian identity, a peaceful background, anything to give them psychological stability. They wake up believing they've always been merchants, traders, or colonists. They have no idea they're actually reborn warriors. How many? Thekvar asked. Over the past 30 years? Hundreds, maybe thousands. Every time humanity's best soldiers, officers, scientists, or leaders die in the line of duty, we bring them back. They're given new identities and sent to live civilian lives across the galaxy. The scale of it was staggering. Thekvar realized that a significant portion of humanity's most capable people were actually the walking dead, clones living false lives, unaware of their true nature. "Why did you leave the program?" he asked. Dr. Yoon's eyes filled with tears. "Because I realized we weren't saving people. We were enslaving them. These clones live their entire lives believing they're someone else. They never get to grieve their own deaths, never get to find peace. And worst of all, the military can reactivate them at any time. All it takes is the right trigger, and their original personalities come flooding back." "Like what happened to Minho," Thekvar said. "Exactly. The suppressed memories are always there, just under the surface. Stress, trauma, or the right stimulus can cause them to break through. When that happens, the subject remembers everything, their real life, their death, and their rebirth." Thekvar felt sick. Humanity had found a way to cheat death, but at the cost of their own people's freedom and sanity. Thekvar knew he couldn't keep this information secret. The Phoenix Protocol was too dangerous, too important for the galaxy's future. After days of careful consideration, he decided to share his findings with the Galactic Council, the governing body that represented all major species in known space. His report spread through alien governments like wildfire. Within hours of its release, emergency sessions were being called on dozens of worlds. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The Altarian Empire declared humanity an abomination against the natural order. Their spiritual leaders proclaimed that bringing people back from death was a violation of cosmic law that threatened the balance of life itself. The Centauri Federation issued statements calling for immediate sanctions against all human territories. Even worse, species that had been at war with each other for centuries began putting aside their differences to focus on this new threat. Ancient enemies started talking about forming alliances against humanity. The possibility of the entire galaxy uniting against one species hadn't happened in over 1,000 years. Thekvar watched the news reports from his ship, feeling both satisfied and worried. He had exposed the truth, but the consequences were spiraling out of control faster than anyone had expected. That's when Minho found him. The human appeared at Thekvar's docking bay 3 days after the report went public. He looked different than before, more confident, more aware, but also deeply troubled. The confused merchant persona was gone, replaced by someone who clearly remembered both of his lives. "We need to talk," Minho said simply. Thekvar was surprised, but not alarmed. Something about Minho's manner suggested he wasn't there for revenge or violence. "How did you find me?" Thekvar asked. "I still have my original military training," Minho replied. "Tracking people was part of my job. Besides, you're not exactly hiding. Half the galaxy knows where you are right now." They met in Thekvar's private quarters. Minho sat down heavily, looking exhausted. "I remember everything now," he said quietly. "My real life as Captain Lee Minho. The battle where you killed me. Waking up in the Phoenix facilities, the memory suppression, all of it. How do you feel about what was done to you?" Thekvar asked. Minho was quiet for a long moment. Angry, confused, grateful, horrified. All at the same time. He looked up at the Zephyrian warrior. "But I also understand why they did it." "Explain that to me," Thekvar said, genuinely curious. "You have to understand something about humans," Minho began. "We don't accept loss the way other species do. When we care about someone, when we love someone, we'll do anything to protect them. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't created by evil people trying to play God. It was created by people who couldn't bear to lose their friends, their family members. They're heroes. Minho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Do you know why I joined the military originally? My younger sister was killed in a pirate attack when she was just 16. I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her, so I dedicated my life to protecting other people's sisters and brothers. Thekvar listened without interrupting. When I died in that battle, the people who brought me back weren't thinking about military advantages or galactic politics. They were thinking about my parents, who had already lost one child. They were thinking about my friends who cared about me. They were thinking about all the people I might still be able to save if I got a second chance. But they stole your memories, Thekvar pointed out. They gave you a false life. Yes, they did, Minho agreed, and that was wrong. But they did it because they thought it would make me happy. They thought I deserved to live a peaceful life after dying in service to humanity. Minho turned back to face Thekvar. I'm not defending what they did to me. The memory suppression, the false identity, the lies, all of that was violation of my freedom, but I want you to understand the motivation behind it. The other species see it as humanity trying to cheat death. Thekvar said, Maybe we are, Minho replied, but we're cheating death because we love life so much we can't accept losing it. Every human who was brought back through Phoenix Protocol was someone's son or daughter, someone's friend or mentor. We couldn't let them go. Thekvar found himself thinking about his own losses over the years, fellow warriors who had died in battle, friends who had grown old and passed away. The Zephyrian way was to honor the dead and accept their passing as natural. But what if there had been a way to bring them back? The galaxy is preparing for war against your species, Thekvar told him. Minho nodded sadly. I know. And I understand. Why? We kept this secret for 30 years. We violated the trust of every other species. We created an army of the undead without telling anyone. What do you think should happen now? I think humanity needs to be honest about what we've done, Minho said. We need to shut down the Phoenix Protocol and find a way to help all the people who were brought back to deal with their real identities. And we need to accept whatever consequences come from our actions. He paused, looking directly at Thekvar. But I also think the galaxy needs to understand that we didn't do this out of evil or ambition. We did it out of love. And maybe, just maybe that love is worth something. The crisis reached its breaking point faster than anyone expected. While diplomats argued in council chambers and politicians made speeches about humanity's crimes against nature, a coalition of 12 alien species decided to take direct action. Thekvar was reviewing intelligence reports on his ship when the emergency broadcast came through. The coalition fleet, over 300 warships from different species, had launched a surprise attack on New Sol Colony, one of humanity's most important civilian settlements. The colony was home to over 2 million people, including families, children, and elderly citizens, who had nothing to do with the Phoenix Protocol. This is not a military target, Thekvar said aloud, staring at the news footage. The coalition claimed they were striking at a Phoenix facility, but anyone could see that New Sol was just a normal colony world with farms, schools, and hospitals. The Dutch attack was brutal and one-sided. Human defense forces were overwhelmed within hours. Civilian evacuation ships were being targeted as they tried to escape the planet's surface. The coalition forces showed no mercy, treating every human as a potential undead threat. Thekvar watched the destruction with growing horror. This wasn't justice, it was genocide driven by fear. His communication system activated, and Minho's face appeared on the screen. The human looked desperate and exhausted. Thekvar, I need your help, Minho said without preamble. The coalition has my family trapped on New Sol. My parents, my nephew, innocent people who don't even know about Phoenix Protocol. They're going to die unless someone stops this madness. What do you want me to do? Thekvar asked. You have influence with the Zephyrian military. Your people aren't part of the coalition, but they're not helping humanity either. If the Zephyrians intervened, it might stop the slaughter. Thekvar was quiet for a long moment. His own government had taken a neutral stance on the human crisis, declaring it an internal galactic matter. But watching innocent civilians die changed everything. I'll see what I can do, he said finally. Over the next 6 hours, Tekvar used every favor and connection he had built during his long military career. He contacted old friends, former enemies, and political leaders across Zephyrian space. His message was simple. This wasn't about punishing humans for their crimes anymore. This was about preventing the massacre of innocent people. The response surprised him. Many Zephyrians had been watching the attack with the same disgust he felt. The idea of targeting civilian families, regardless of species, went against their warrior code of honor. By the time Tekvar's fleet arrived at New Sol, the situation was desperate. The colony's shields were failing, and coalition forces were preparing for a final assault on the evacuation centers, where hundreds of thousands of civilians were trapped. "This is Commander Tekvar of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "I'm ordering an immediate ceasefire. Any ship that fires on civilian targets will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The coalition fleet was confused and angry. They hadn't expected interference from the Zephyrians, who were supposed to be neutral. Several commanders demanded that Tekvar explain his actions. "I'm here because I've seen enough death," Tekvar replied. "Humans may have violated natural law with their resurrection technology, but that doesn't justify murdering children and families." The standoff lasted for hours. Coalition ships surrounded the planet, while Zephyrian vessels protected the evacuation routes. Neither side wanted to fire the first shot that would start a much larger war. During the tense negotiations that followed, Tekvar found himself in an unexpected position. Both sides trusted him. The coalition because he had exposed the Phoenix Protocol, and humanity because he had intervened to save their people. "There has to be another way," he argued during the emergency council session. "Destroying humanity won't solve the problem of resurrection technology. That knowledge exists now. Other species will eventually develop similar capabilities." "Then what do you propose?" asked the Altarian representative. Tekvar looked around the council chamber, seeing fear and anger on dozens of alien faces, but he also saw intelligence and reason. "Oversight," he said simply. "Instead of destroying the Phoenix Protocol, we control it. We make it transparent. We establish galactic regulations for resurrection technology and ensure it's never used. In secret again." The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Many species still wanted to see humanity punished for their deception, but gradually practical concerns began to outweigh emotional reactions. The final treaty took 3 weeks to negotiate. Humanity agreed to place all Phoenix facilities under joint galactic oversight. The process would be transparent, with representatives from multiple species monitoring every resurrection. No one could be brought back without approval from the Galactic Council, and all subjects would retain their original memories rather than having false identities imposed on them. Most importantly, Tekvar himself was appointed as the primary, external monitor. His job would be to ensure that humanity never again used resurrection technology in secret. As he stood in the new Phoenix Oversight Facility, watching scientists from a dozen species working together, Tekvar reflected on everything that had happened. He had started this journey believing that humans were violating the natural order. Now he understood something different. Humans didn't refuse to accept death because they were arrogant or evil. They refused to accept death because they loved life so much they couldn't bear to lose it. Their stubborn defiance of fate, their refusal to give up even when facing the impossible, wasn't a flaw. It was what made them human. And perhaps, Tekvar thought, the galaxy needed that kind of stubborn hope. In a universe filled with dangers and darkness, maybe having people who refused to accept that anything was truly lost forever wasn't such a terrible thing after all. The Phoenix Protocol would continue, but now it would serve not just humanity, but all species who chose to embrace the possibility that death didn't have to be the end of everything worth preserving, armed around the galaxy, living new lives without knowing their true nature. Tekvar realized he was investigating something that could change the balance of power between all species forever. Suspected he had stumbled onto one of humanity's greatest secrets, a secret so important that they were willing to create false identities and fake entire lifetimes to protect it.